It's Victory Day for Bangladesh's 176 million people. The moment the former state of East Pakistan became the modern, independent nation of Bangladesh in 1971. But what's been happening in the past 15 months has shaken this country to its core.
There's been a rise in vigilante justice, in mob violence, so the perception that law and order is deteriorating.
Protests over government job quotas that escalated into a wider anti-government movement and violent crackdown led to the ousting of long-time ruler Sheikh Hasina.
The unemployed, educated youth is the ticking time bomb. If we cannot provide decent employment for them, God knows, maybe another upheaval.
Now, under caretaker leader and Nobel Peace Prize laureate Muhammad Yunus, the Muslim-majority state faces perhaps the most significant transitional moment since its independence.
The elections are going to happen, but what type of election and what outcome?
Religious forces or religious fanatic forces find themselves more important than before. They have been trying to impose their agenda in their own way.
With a crucial general election and constitutional referendum coming up in February, all eyes are on South Asia's second largest economy and what it decides to do next. I'm Mark Lobel, and this is Disorder, a podcast where we try to find order and make sense of this mad world. This week, we're looking at the risk of rising Islamic militancy in Bangladesh's evolving political situation. There are real concerns right now of unfettered corruption, vigilante justice, and eroding press freedom in a country with a rising Islamic influence and a fresh push for Sharia law that could not only reshape its own foundations, but also regional stability, security cooperation, and geopolitical rivalries across South Asia. So, to find out what's really going on inside Bangladesh at this crucial time, I'm going to be speaking exclusively to three people on the ground there who all have their own concerns. An acclaimed economist who's been touring the country, an under-fire female journalist, and an expert at fighting corruption from within. So, let's start with what's on voters' minds. Let's speak to economist and public policy analyst Debapriya Bhattacharya now. Great to see you, Debapriya. You've just returned from the scenic town of Rangamati in a hilly area in southeastern Bangladesh, known as the capital of the Chittagong Hill Tracts. I hope you enjoyed those lush landscapes, that wonderful lake, hanging bridge and valley, all steeped in Buddhist culture. Magnet for tourists this time of year, isn't it? How was it?
It was great. Thank you for inviting me to this podcast. I was concluding going around the country, having pre-election discussion with the citizens to assess their mood and also to find out what are their expectations from the upcoming elections, both from the election commissions and also for the new government which may come after that. So that was the major issue. I wish I could enjoy the local beauty a bit more.
But that must have been fascinating as a convener on this Citizens Platform for Sustainable Development Goals, carrying out these pre-election consultations with citizens. Everyone listening here will want to know, what were they telling you? What were their hopes? What were their fears as the election nears?
I think what is important to note that the concern that the elections will not take place at all, that concern is vanishing. So now that the election dates have been announced, so the confidence is coming back, so that the elections are happening. But the worry is elsewhere. The worry is whether we will get a credible outcome, which will be based on fair voting and fair counting, and there will be less violence before and after the elections. That concern still persists. Whether the government, the election commission, the law enforcement agencies will be able to maintain the rule of law, as they say, before the elections and during the elections and after the election. That concern is still out there.
What about the issues that people are caring about to improve their lives? What are the things that they're hoping for and what are the things that they're fearful of?
I think the common half a dozen issues which are coming out is, number one, is about the re-establishing the stability and continuity. So from that perspective, what people are talking about, how to get a much more professional, independent administrative structure, which is not politicized. It is also looking forward to having an independent judicial system. It is also thinking about having a law enforcement agency which are not partisan or not party cadres. So the issue of good governance in many of its manifestations are coming out. Administration, judiciary, law enforcement agencies issues. So that is one major area. The second area, I think the aspiration is about accountability. After stability, it's the issue of accountability. Accountability of all the state structures, but more importantly, the politicians. Those who are going to run for elections, who are going to promise sun and the moon during the elections but will not deliver later. So the people are asking, what are the measures we can think of in order to make the politicians deliver on their promises? That's another concern. The third issue which is coming out is about the security. The security issue is across the board concern, but it is more of a concern for the women. It is a concern of the religious and ethnic minorities. It's a concern of the transgender community. It is also a concern of people living in the far-flung areas where there may not be adequate number of posts of the police or the army. So the issue of security has come through very strongly, along with good governance and accountability. And if I may mention another one, it is a concern about productive employment. Productive employment, the concern is pervasive, but more amongst the younger generation. The younger generation coming out from the universities, coming out from technical education centers. Given the current economic situation, this concern has heightened quite a lot. So I just picked up a couple of them now.
And it's really interesting them telling you that, because you are a distinguished fellow at the Centre for Policy Dialogue and were a former ambassador to the World Trade Organization and UN offices in Geneva. So with all that information from the voters and with all your knowledge of how things work, just looking ahead to the election in February, there are two parties leading the polls, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party and Jamaat-e-Islami. So what chance for political and economic stability and those voters' concerns being addressed from either of those parties? How would they approach things differently?
Well, you have mentioned two parties. That's a popular thought. But we should all remember that we don't have a good benchmark to assess what would be the outcome. Because at least for 15 years, we didn't have a proper national elections. There were fraudulent elections, but many of these, particularly these two parties, were not always participant of those elections. So we do not have a good benchmark. And in between, there are new parties which have emerged. The party of the new generation, which also led the student people's uprising, they have created party. And then there are other traditional parties, middle of the center, traditional left. So those are there. So it's very difficult to predict. What is also still not very clear, whether the people are going to vote for the candidate or they're going to vote for the party. There may be surprises in the outcome because we really don't know the people's mind. Having said that, we can see that the BNP is still being considered the party which may most likely get the maximum number of seats. Whether they will have a simple majority, whether they will have more than that, 2/3 majority to amend the constitution, that is to be seen. And whether, and Jamaat-e-Islami is coming into an election on its own after a very, very long time. But they're expected to do good. Early signals of that had been their party students' wing have been doing good in the university elections, which was very, very surprising for many of us. So given that, the Jamaat-e-Islami is expected to do good. But the interesting point is whether between these two parties we will get anything more in between. So if our BNP, Bangladesh Nationalist Party, is a middle-of-the-road party, it is a centrist conservative party, if I may put that, and you have a Islamic party on the other hand. So whether we will have any other third group of MPs, whether it is left of the center or far left, traditional left, or extreme Islamic groups, that's also something highly possible. So it's all up in the air, and how the elections will be conducted, how the election commission, the returning officers, the law enforcement agencies, how they will behave, whether they will remain independent or not, whether they will be chased out by mob or not. All these issues are still out there. That's why the citizens' concerns are there, that the elections are going to happen, but what type of election and what outcome?
And on that note that you mentioned that there might be an extreme Islamic group, and I guess the furthest that could go would be implementing Sharia law into Bangladesh. Is this scaremongering, or could it mean a new relationship with Pakistan, a bolstered relationship with Pakistan, and a quite different Bangladesh after next February?
I think that concern is a bit overdone. If you look at Bangladesh as it stands today, that definitely the country has moved to the right. It was a central left government which really did not deliver on what it said. There was a huge difference between its rhetorics and reality. But overall, the country has moved to the right. And that move is not totally independent of the move which is happening in the subcontinent. And that move is also not independent of what's happening in Europe. It is also not independent of the move which we see in United States of America. So I think before judging Bangladesh about its political reorientation, we should be mindful about the context within which this country is operating. So this is one. The second point is that Bangladesh is essentially, it's what we have had, the Islam we have had, it has a lot of cultural, cross-cultural element, cross-historical elements over there. So there is a history in Bangladesh where religion and politics have remained separate in many ways. But at the same time, the people are quite religious, but may not be fanatics. I think that distinction has to be made. And so we have lived in peace with all types of religions for quite long, although the intolerance has increased in the recent past. That is no secret. So it is to be seen how Bangladesh re-emerges through this election, how the democratic transition will reflect its changed mindset, collective mindset or not. But having said that, let me put it another perspective, which may help us to interpret the outcomes. Bangladesh is now a very highly globalized society. A huge community is residing outside the country, more than 1 billion people, although a large part of them is in Middle East. But also there are other diaspora in Europe, US, and others. And they fully appreciate a country with an image of extreme Islamic or religious, whatever may be the religion, is not very helpful. It's not helpful for carrying out exports and imports business. It's not also helpful to sending your people to work in other countries. It is also not helpful to invite for getting more foreign direct investment. So that practical approach is very much there within the ruling elites in Bangladesh. So So we can wait and see how it plays out, the outcome. But at the same time, we would know that these outcomes may also have different type of interpretation when it comes to real policies.
Let me ask you then, in your heart of hearts, today, as things stand, as you see things, what is the risk of rising Islamic militancy in Bangladesh's evolving political situation?
That issue is very much there. It is pertinent. It is more pertinent than possibly a couple of years back. But at the same time, this is not something which is coming from abroad. It has grown within the country. There must be some kind of an issue. It's the political scientists to interpret why a very mild-mannered mixed race like Bengalis have opted more for religion within the politics. And when this country was born out of linguistic nationalism in many ways. So whether it is because of the suppression of democracy over the decade and a half has forced many people to look for alternative ideology. And since the left ideology was down since 1990, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, and China having its own way of progress, the only organized religion which was available to them as an ideological tool, that is out there. But it does not necessarily mean that they are really violating the democratic norms. They are all coming into elections. They are abiding by the rules of the game. So we will have to know that that type of religion also plays out in countries like Turkey. We know it very well. Turkey, the government which is in Turkey, also has a very strong dose of religious nationalism. And that is also true for many Christian majority countries as well. So, and we have seen how the absence of a binding force can lead into social strifes in many of the sub-Saharan African countries. We are living in a very difficult world at this moment. There is nothing sacrosanct. Everything is up in the air, and it is for the people to be given the free choice and informed choice as each of the political parties are going to pursue their ideological battle. I remain very optimistic that we are in a transition and we will make the right choices. If we don't do it, we will correct them through practice.
But I'd like to delve a little bit deeper into the causes and turn to the economy, your specialist subject. An IMF program has been running since 2023. How has that impacted, and has there been a rise or drop in poverty recently?
We have had an authoritarian government, not a totalitarian one, but an authoritarian government, which lacked democratic accountability, and the democratic deficit was very acute. But what is also not quite often underscored, that we have had a very precarious economic situation. The high inflation rate, where the foreign reserve was going down, the national currency was weakening. We didn't have enough foreign exchange to open letters of credit for investment. There was a dysfunctional banking sector with high non-performing loans. There was liquidity crisis in the banking sector. The private capital market was also totally bankrupt in many ways. We have had energy crisis at the same time. So, and the social protection system was very thin. Everything together, the macroeconomic situation was very bad. And at the same time, the prospect for growth, not to talk about inclusive growth, was a far cry. So under the circumstances, if the political one has to understand the political upheaval in the context of the deteriorating economic situation. The very fact that the students got so angry with the quota system, restrictions in the government job market, was an expression that how bad the employment situation was. And that's why they got so angry, or they got, a bit desperate to get the government job, which were also being given to the party people, not necessarily based on merit. So that's the economic situation. What has happened in the last 1.5 years is that we have stabilized the economy. up to a point. The downslide has been halted. So the inflation rate has come down a bit, not totally down. It's still 8% to 9%. We have improved our foreign exchange reserves significantly. We have stabilized the exchange rate. Taka is not falling. It is rather the other way around. In order not to appreciate let the Taka appreciate, central bank is sterilizing the market, buying up dollars. The export is going on up to a point. The FDI, the foreign direct investment situation, is more or less okay. The food security situation is under control. And also the public food distribution system is there up to a point. But the major point what is there is that whilst we have stabilized the external sector, but the fiscal balance is still very fragile. So when I talk about the fiscal balance, I mean the revenue earning has not increased. The revenue earning has not increased also because the private investment did not go up. The private investment did not go up because they cannot draw down on the bank credit. They cannot draw down on the bank credit because the interest rate is very high. And there comes in your world IMF, because we are under a program under which we are pursuing a contractionary monetary policy. And a contractionary monetary policy would mean that the money supply will be controlled, particularly through instruments like high interest rate. So that is affecting the investment strongly, which has implications for your employment generation. And employment generation and still pretty moderately high inflation rate, inadequate public delivery system, and also the social protection financing is very low. So as a result, the poverty situation is not improving. And rather the inequality, as we say, the non-inclusive growth is still persisting. That concerns me. So the major challenge for the upcoming government is to turn around how to make the transition from stability to growth. So the economy may have stabilized up to a point, but it is not growing as it should, given the size of the population and 2 million people coming into the labor market every year. That challenge is out there. The unemployed, educated youth is the ticking time bomb. If we cannot provide decent employment for them, God knows, maybe another upheaval.
Wow, a ticking time bomb, very interesting. I must say, the problem of stability turning to growth is not just a Bangladeshi problem, certainly something that other countries closer to home, from where I'm speaking, are looking at too. Look, we always like to end, Debapriya, with a more positive note or a route to hope. So let me ask you, who do you think is best placed, or what route is the best one to take to order Bangladesh's current disorder and realise its strong aspiration for democracy?
Yeah, I think, you see, the very fact I stay in this country and still go around with people, it shows that how optimistic we are about our future. And we have seen the transformation taking place in this country in front of our eyes. Say, for example, when we got independent in 1971, people would say that this country has no resources, no national, no strategic value. They're going to eat each other as they're going to suffer from famine and malnutrition. Look, we were 70 million people. Now we are 170 million people. And we are now, what we produced at that time as food, cereals, we produce 3 times more. So the population may have doubled. We have tripled our production. So you see, we have really, given a befitting reply to the neo-Malthusian from that point of view. When we got independent, our average longevity at birth was less than 40 years. Now we are 73 years at the point of birth, which is equal to the global average. Can you think of a low middle income country like Bangladesh with so much population having a longevity at birth which is equal to global average? Look at our exports, look at our manpower imports, the remittances we do. So I think Bangladesh has a tremendous potential, and its major resource is its human resource. And the human resource, if we can really make them more skilled, more educated, properly handled, sky is the limit. I don't see any problem on those counts. Give a bit more good governance, a bit more quality education, a bit more continuity of policies, and a bit of a international support. I think it can really be a good model for many other developing countries how to survive in the era of disruptive development, and with huge, as you say, the outstanding problems which we still have. So the election, what we see, is a huge opportunity to transform those potential into reality.
Debapriya, you've shone a light so clearly on the situation in Bangladesh for us. I can't thank you enough. Thank you very much for joining us from Dhaka.
Thank you for inviting me.
Coming up next, what does the joint editor of Bangladesh's largest English language newspaper have to say about the erosion of women's rights and surviving the threats aimed at her? Welcome back to a look at the security and political situation within Bangladesh. I'm now joined by Asha Mehreen Amin, the joint editor of Bangladesh's biggest English language daily newspaper, The Daily Star, and her influential and courageous column, No Strings Attached, focuses on social issues, human rights, and women's rights in the country. Asha, it's a real pleasure to get this chance to speak to you, and I appreciate that your profession and publication, including Protom Allo, the Daily Star's sister publication, has been the target of attacks. So not only do we appreciate you speaking to us on that level, but I also wanted to start by asking you about how that feels to be somewhat inhibited in what you say, despite being a journalist for 33 or so years, because of certain elements in Bangladeshi society.
Thank you for having me. When it started, it was very unnerving and quite scary, in fact, because of the things that were threatened. And we had people outside our office threatening to do certain things, and we had to have security. We had to have the police, outside our office, things like that. But, over time, I think we've, it's not been that bad. And we're kind of used to, I think the threats are more online. You see a lot of comments underneath our videos or, our multimedia content. So those comments are a little, negative, and, there is a certain amount of propaganda against us. But I think we've kind of become a little used to it. We've decided that, we're not going to let things like that intimidate us. And we're just going to do, what we're supposed to do, which is our journalism, and try to, report the facts as best as possible.
The Islamist movement is gaining in popularity in the run-up to the election in February. How concerning is that to you?
It's concerning when the rhetoric becomes extreme and it becomes undemocratic, when it tries to weaponize religion to intimidate certain people, for example, women especially have been targeted. Most people, they do want democracy in this country and they do want elections. So, I'm concerned about those kind of groups who try to weaponize religion and try to use it to other people. There's a lot of othering going on. That kind of thing does worry me, and I'm worried that, if those groups do gain power, if they're part of the government, how are they going to conduct themselves? It seems like a bit of a clash with democratic values.
We've been hearing that there's some pressure on the interim government from Islamist groups. If that pressure continues, do you think Bangladesh's secular foundations as a state are under threat? We saw some examples of the cancelling of recruitment of music and physical education teachers in primary schools and eroding of women's rights.
I think that's what I feel is the most concerning, which is women's rights and women's safety. After August 5th, it seems that, as I said, there's been a weaponizing of religion. There's been a kind of rise in misogyny as well.
You've noticed that since the protests?
It didn't just happen all of a sudden. It just happened kind of progressively. After August 5th, first of all, there wasn't any government for a few days. And then on August 8th, the government came in. And so everything has been pretty chaotic, and there's been a lot of lawlessness. So it took a while before, you got a semblance of order. And in the meantime, you've seen all these certain groups, they're becoming more emboldened, and they have been sort of taking space, and especially in online, sometimes even, in public spheres as well. So it's been happening over time, over the last 1.5 years.
And what are those groups saying and doing online or in public spheres?
In public spheres, sometimes women are targeted. I mean, there's been a rise in vigilante justice, in mob violence. So you have a certain group of people who are, they'll just surround somebody and just hurl all kinds of abuses, or just try to say that, oh, you're going against religion, or this is not how you're supposed to dress, or this is not how you're supposed to behave. I mean, there have been isolated incidents like that, but enough to make you feel a little wary when you're out on the streets. And online, I think it's a lot worse because people can be anonymous online. So you have a lot of these people. I don't know who they are. They're probably using fake names, and so they target celebrities. They target journalists, women journalists who are anchors, or people who are just doing interviews, and also politicians, like women politicians who are trying to make their space.
How coordinated do you think it all is?
Within the groups, it's pretty coordinated, because you'll see, when you see the comments, you can make out that it's the exact same comment, like over and over again. So those are obviously done by AI or whatever. In fact, AI is another, AI generated images and videos are another problem that women are facing.
Jamaat and the BNP are neck and neck in the polls. Can you paint a picture for us of what Jamaat-e-Islami is presenting at the moment? Because it seems to be presenting a slightly different image than in the past. What we knew about it was it was a historical anti-liberation party in 1971. It was associated with a history of political violence. It had ideological opposition to secularism and an independent press. Overall, it was a desire for an Islamic state based on Sharia law. But those three things were really quite clearly associated with the party. Is that what the party represents, or are they different now?
I mean, as far as what kind of state they want, I think they do want Sharia law to be the main law. But at the same time, they even have they've nominated a Hindu candidate. They've said that they will nominate a candidate from other ethnic groups, and they present not a very extreme point of view as far as the way that they're campaigning and the way that they're presenting themselves.
Since the ousting of Sheikh Hasina, we've seen an interim government. How stable do you think Bangladesh is now, and how would you rate the interim government's performance?
Right now, because of the impending elections in February, since that's pretty much a definite thing, a lot of the uncertainty has cleared and people are feeling a lot more confident. In terms of human rights, today is actually we're recording it on the Human Rights Day, and a lot of reports have come in, and they're quite grim actually. So the numbers, the statistics are really harrowing. So, for example, the Human Rights Support Society has found at least 156 people and 242 injured in 276 incidents of mob violence. At least 1,909 women and girls were subjected to sexual violence. 789 were raped, with over half of the victims being under 18. Then there's been...
And in what period of time is that happening?
In the last 1 year, but it's still happening. But mob violence is something I think that's kind of increased a lot over the last 1 year or so. And then there also something that's shocking to us is that there's still been some incidents of custodial deaths. About 29 people, according to one human rights organization, died as a result of torture or while they were in custody. So those figures really sort of indicate that the government has not been very successful when it comes to getting a grip of the rule of law and maintaining law and order. And one of the reasons for that is because the police, after August 5th, they were not really functioning properly at all. So that has been a big issue. And, the government has been trying to restore the morale and try to get them to work the way they're supposed to. But it has been a big challenge for them, and they've had to bring in, other security forces to help them. But it's still, the law and order situation, it might be better if you compare it with last year, but still when you actually see the numbers of these kind of things, especially the custodial deaths and the deaths from mob violence, those are very shocking. And also, I think it's also a question of perception. So the perception that law and order is deteriorating, the perception that if you go out at night, you might be mugged or murdered, or those kind of fears are there. So I think that's where the government needs to really, restore the confidence of the people.
If we go back to the movement, of course, it was led by students. There were protests by student leaders, and they in fact formed their own party since then. How has that movement maintained its momentum, or has it not?
It's still at a very, I would say, a very nascent sort of stage. It's not easy for people to just get into politics if you're not part of an established party. So everything is very new. So for them to connect with the public and make themselves known is quite a bit of a challenge for them. These students, they have, I think, established certain truths and certain principles or values that need to be upheld. I think that when it comes what they fought for, what, basically so many of their peers have died for, so many general people who gave their lives during this movement. So they do want to remind everyone of that. And I think their presence, however little impact they might have on the political scene, but their presence is very important on our conscience.
Asha, tell us, in the name of your column, No Strings Attached, how crucial this transition point in Bangladesh's history is.
I mean, it's unbelievably crucial because people have been waiting for so long for a fair election. They've been waiting to get some sort of normalcy in their lives, and they believe that election is the first step towards that. So it's really, really crucial, and we've just gone through such a traumatic time. Um, you know, apart from the actual uprising that happened and all the killings and the violence that we saw right in front of us. Even the last 15 years, people have been really deprived of their rights. This whole transition has given rise to a lot of hope. There's also fear, of course, because we don't know how the next government will operate.
The bottom line is that you want free and fair elections. That may now happen, but without the Awami League, that throws a lot of uncertainty into what the result could be. And there are two very different outcomes on the ballot paper.
Of course, there will be some difference in the outcomes, but I mean, the other party will be the opposition, be a strong opposition, which is what we actually want in our parliament. We don't want a one-party rule. We want a good opposition as well, because for the last three elections, I mean, the parliaments, they've just been functioning. I mean, the opposition there was actually really not an opposition. There hasn't been the culture of healthy debates, actual discussions on actual issues.
And so just to end on this note, Asha, it's fascinating. Do you think the fact that you will have a strong opposition would therefore decrease the risk of rising Islamic militancy in Bangladesh's evolving political situation?
It is one of the factors.
What are the other factors?
I don't think that the majority of the people would want have those extreme values. I mean,
and that perhaps could be the legacy of Muhammad Yunus, finally delivering the country free and fair elections.
Yes, I think that would be definitely his legacy.
Asha, it has been such a pleasure talking to you. Absolutely fascinating. And I'm sure everybody listening will want to ensure that you remain safe and able to do your job in the brilliant way that you've been doing it for many decades now. Coming up after the break, what does the head of Transparency International Bangladesh think about the state of corruption in his country? And we'll get his fascinating take on how Bangladesh's evolving politics may radically transform the power balance between India and Pakistan. It's an honor to be joined from Dhaka now by the Executive Director of Transparency International Bangladesh, Iftikhar Uzzaman. Iftikhar, you've been busy these past few days with the International Anti-Corruption Day yesterday and International Human Rights Day today, a few days before we're actually broadcasting on Victory Day. I wanted to start by asking you, how would you rate the interim government's performance with respect to the rule of law, human rights, corruption and press freedom, all of those things?
The interim government did some very good things. For the first time, they constituted a number of reform commissions, including reform of the Anti-Corruption Commission, reform of the judiciary, constitutional reform, election reform, and so on and so forth. There is a national charter that has been agreed upon through consultation with the major political parties. Continuation of some of the injustices like extrajudicial killing, mob injustice, and so on and so forth have actually continued. Primarily because the law enforcement agency the police has been the key institution that was the key pillar of rise of kleptocracy in Bangladesh. Reforming that police and other law enforcement agencies is not going to happen overnight. It's remain morally very incapable and unprofessional. The whole police forces have to be rebuilt. So the media has been, according to our count, in the last 15 months or so, at least 1,000 people, media persons have been subjected to various attacks or cases and victimized for professional duty. At least 40 cases of extrajudicial killings also have taken place during this period. And similarly, there have been some torture in custody. Unknown dead bodies are being found in rivers or water bodies and so on and so forth.
It's going to be concerning for people to hear that there are these reports of ongoing extrajudicial killings and alleged torture since August 2024 and in an increase in attacks on religious and cultural minorities.
What has happened, this space has been created for religious fanatics to grow or faith-based political forces to develop in this space that was created as a result of this confrontational politics between the two major political parties. Religious forces or religious fanatic forces, they find themselves more empowered than before, and they have been trying to impose their agenda in their own way.
What is the risk of rising Islamic militancy in Bangladesh's evolving political situation? Is it something Bangladesh and we in the West should be worried about?
There is a clear indication of religion or Islam-based politics to gain in terms of mileage. And for that, there are many reasons. We have always thought, these religious parties will never have a more than single-digit vote in the popular vote in Bangladesh. But those days are apparently no longer there. I mean, it seems that they have gained acceptability to the common people. That has international influence. For example, a lot of Bangladeshis are working in some of the Middle Eastern countries, and there is many people think that there is a cultural influence of religious influence of that being brought in Bangladesh, and also there are within the country there have been faith-based education has also developed in terms of madrasa schooling and so on and so forth. In the post 2024 5th August transformation that has taken place, seems to be empowered the religious forces.
Is it fair to associate that with the rise of Jamaat-e-Islami in the polls as possible election winners?
I'll not be surprised if their popular votes goes up quite significantly, and that has been demonstrated. Jamaat and its student front and others have been trying to successfully create an impression among the people that they are different. They are different from the mainstream political parties. They have, for example, they claim to have anti-corruption as an agenda of their own. They offer propose themselves or submit themselves as honest as candidates. All these factors taken together, I think, is giving a mileage to the Jamaat and other faith-based parties who are also, by the way, coming into a coalition for the election. One would not be surprised if it goes even more than beyond 20% or so.
But Iftikhar, are you concerned about Jamaat's rise at all?
There are definitely reasons for concern if some of the things that have been happening over the last several months is a trend. The interim government has given in to this pressure group of faith-based nature, and similarly they also gave in to the very vulgar and very violent kind of a demonstration against the Women Reform Commission report when it was submitted. and they wanted the commission to be disbanded. So the interim government didn't take any strong position. Subsequently, Juliet list.
The polls are close, and I do want to ask you, what do you think rising Islamist influence from an outright victory or from more right-wing opposition to, say, the BNP would mean for Bangladesh's national identity, economy and minority rights?
Well, it's difficult to forecast in politics. As they say, only fools take a chance to forecast in politics. But I think that the way the things are moving, and in fact, in a way, BNP is also helping Jamaat's popularity. The way that this continuation of this culture of being involved in all kinds of abuse of power and preparing for the. I mean, there is a clear indication of a syndrome of it's our time. We've been out of power for so long. It's our turn now that we make use of it. So that's the kind of a trend, and so one should not be surprised if the results are very close. So and in fact, it can be a parliament which can be quite something that Bangladesh has not seen in the last nearly 2 decades or more.
And how do you think that would affect the international political order and possibly sour relations with India and build closer relations with Pakistan and continue the economic ties with China and closer relations with someone like Turkey?
Well, you see, first of all, about India, I mean, unfortunately, India put all its egg in one basket, and India has not been able to reconcile with in my view, the worst political and diplomatic defeat in its history in recent times. So it is still a kind of stage to that mindset that they found themselves surprised and defeated on the 5th of August 2024. So and as a result of which one can attribute the kind of various challenges that Bangladesh is facing today, sheltering the former ousted leader and many of her allies, the cronies who are present. Been given shelter there. So this is, in any case, Bangladesh-India relation. It's a very close interdependence between the two, but on the other hand, it has always been it's kind of a love and hate relationship. India being the big neighbor, there has been a lot of reasons to believe that they wanted Bangladesh to be under its control, as a result of which they have supported blindly the former regime, which deviated quite prominently from basic fundamentals of democratic practices. And that has created this opportunity for Pakistan to gain in mileage in terms of its closer relationship with Bangladesh, which has always been disturbed as a result of what has happened in 1971. Pakistan has failed to recognize their own kind of genocide they actually perpetrated on the people of Bangladesh. They have not apologized for it. This fall of the regime has given Pakistan some opportunity to come closer to Bangladesh, and Bangladesh also has been trying to balance the two relationships. And similarly, in the same framework, actually, China, your enemy is my friend. I think China would be interested in having its business and investment interests more than any political interest in Bangladesh.
So this does open the door to closer relations with Pakistan.
Yes, it does. It has already. It is very clearly, it's much closer.
If there are closer relations with Jamaat-e-Islami and other groups in the country, is that fair to say that people would look at that with some concern about the role of Sharia law, for example, in Bangladesh, and perhaps in terms of security in the region?
If you look at the last 2 decades or so, there was the whole India and international community looked at Bangladesh from the prism of its so-called security threat arising from religious militancy. And that's as a result of which they chose the better evil, quote and unquote, between the two options that were available. So it was a kind of blind support, not only from India, but also, in my understanding, the international community also, in broad sense of the term. So that actually helped the process of development of authoritarianism in Bangladesh. If you look at the three controversial elections that everybody knows, and including India provided full-fledged support, blind support. The international community were uncomfortable, quote and unquote, but next morning, business as usual. So they have always, preached democratic rights, right to vote, human rights and justice and so on. But that it was being brutally violated, that didn't matter much. They wanted to continue to support the Awami League regime, and so did the Western powers. I should say, actually.
And what about that point about the potential rise of Sharia law in Bangladesh?
I know there can be many ways to interpret what Sharia law implies, and if hypothetically Jamaat comes to power together with its religious front allies, these parties, then there is a possibility of Bangladesh kind of adopting Sharia law. One doesn't rule out, but frankly, I don't see that is happening in Bangladesh. If there are indications that the rise of religion-based political forces is already creating a new kind of risk for that kind of equality between men and women, gender equality, and other kind of diverse communities. So, the possibility of Jamaat actually forming the government, I think, in my view, is something that is still unacceptable for the people of Bangladesh.
And if it did happen, as you say, it's not the most likely scenario, but it's not impossible. And Sharia law came in, and there are different types of Sharia law, as you say, or different interpretations. How would you feel about that?
Well, that remains, to be seen. And there are countries in the world, where there are Sharia law that people definitely are also enjoying freedom of various types. But I'm not defending Sharia law. This is something that will be a big change in Bangladesh if that happens, and that will be a matter of major concern, definitely.
You've, Iftikhar, if I pull together everything that you've said, it sounds like this period has been very disorderly since Sheikh Hasina was removed. We've seen corruption, we've seen attacks on minorities. It's a worrying period. It sounds like you think that maybe the BNP will be the next government, and going forwards. What do you think is the best route for Bangladesh now, out of this current disorder, to realize its strong aspiration for democracy?
Corruption has continued, but having said that, to your question, the most important stabilizing factor for Bangladesh would be to hold a free and fair election and transfer power to the elected government, whoever it is. This is a new Bangladesh, at least a beginning of a new Bangladesh. People of Bangladesh have shown that they can stand up against abuse of power, they can stand up against authoritarian tendencies.
And one final question, maybe a prediction. Do you think there will be free and fair elections in the next 2 or so months?
There will be an election, and one hopes that there will be free and fair election. There are people who think that it is not fully independent; it is biased by one or other, political party. We have not discussed about the potential destabilizing role that can be played by the social media, which is also creating through misinformation, disinformation, and a lot of it being apparently fueled by forces outside the country. In India, by the agents of the fallen regime, and also with this apparently support of the forces in India.
And just to give the final piece of insight to people listening to this, if there is lobbying or pressure on social media, what should we be looking out for? In which direction, which party will those forces be pushing towards?
Well, it's very clear that the Awami League has been ousted from power. That's true, but it remains still a large political party, and its leaders are out of the country. Some are under arrest or in jails, but its activists, its supporters are there. and they are not going to be silent. Some of them may be boycotting the vote, but many of them may be also using various means of destabilizing the political context in many different ways.
Would they be pushing for the BNP or Jamaat or somebody else?
Local dynamics will determine, for example, in one constituency, the voters may be in collusion with the BNP. In another, they can be with Jamaat. In another, they can be with the NCP. In another, they can be with the JP, which is the the party of the former military ruler Ershad, General Ershad.
Wow, so you've got 20% of the electorate that could go any which way.
Yeah, it can be. There are speculations that they will be supporting one new alliance that is emerging. So I think, and they are forming some kind of coalition with other smaller parties.
Iftikhar Uzzaman, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Well, that's it for this week. If you too want to help order the disorder, join our Mega Orderers Club. You get ad-free listening, early episode releases, and the chance to join us for our live event at Rusi on January the 8th. For more, visit the link in the show notes. I am also available to speak at, host, or moderate your live events, and there's a link to my website with all my contact details in the show notes too. Don't forget about our YouTube channel as well. If you want to see these discussions and all our brilliant guests, as well as extra exclusive videos and explainers, then please consider subscribing. The link is in the show notes. It's just left for me to thank our producer, who is George McDonough. Disorder is part of the Evergreen Podcast Network. Thanks for listening. I hope you have an orderly week.